Jon, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
Maybe I speak for Vinny as well, but for myself, I come across the content all the time. We were chatting with Ritson. He was on the podcast some time ago and sharing some stories. So really excited for this episode, and want to jump right in to one of the concepts that you talk about quite a lot, which is the 11x rule.
I mean, it really starts with the 95-5 rule, right? Which is this piece of work that we did. I currently work at Evidenza, which does AI market research, right? This is the company that I started with Peter Weinberg, Brian Watroba, but the 11x rule, I mean, that dates back to my time at LinkedIn. And at LinkedIn, I started a thing with some other folks called the B2B Institute. And one of the things we became famous for, to the degree we became famous at all, because as a reminder, it's B2B marketing and nobody's really famous in B2B marketing. But the micro fame that we have in maybe B2B marketing has to do with this idea called the 95-5 rule. We owe obviously a great debit to Professor John Dawes from Ehrenberg-Bass for this work. He came up with the idea. I mean, we helped to kind of shepherd him to the idea. He actually wrote the paper and did a lot of the research. But the 95-5 rule is simply saying in any market, some people are in market to buy today and most people are not in market. They're not ready to buy today. And the proportions are as the name sounds. 5% of people are in market today, but most people are not in market today, 95%. And actually, the people who are not in market, the 95%, that's actually who you need to market to, right? Like you'll get some growth from the people who are in market today, but primarily it's building future demand among the 95% who are not yet in the market. That's kind of counterintuitive. It's weird to think actually a lot of my growth will come from marketing to people who cannot buy today. People are very confused by that idea. That's an important idea. And we can talk a little bit about how you market to those people. But once you have kind of these proportions in your head, you can then start to think about, okay, there's 95-5. Well, how does that break down by category, for example? Because it's not true in every category, right? That it's 95-5. Obviously, in consumer categories like milk, people buy milk every week. Maybe in some cases, they buy milk 2 times a week. But then you have in B2B categories like CRM, where people only buy CRM once every 3 years, or you have ERP, where people only buy ERP once every 8 years. So you can start to kind of think about, in some cases, people are always in market. In some cases, people are never in market. You can start to do the calculations on that. And the 11X rule is this idea that, in B2B, like nobody's in market in a week, but in a lot of B2C categories, like 20% of people are in market in any given week, like for milk. And so you can just start to do the math and say, in a given week, 40 times more people are in market in consumer categories than in B2B categories. If you zoom out to, let's say, a quarter, 5% of people in B2B will be in market. Well, in the consumer world, 60% of people will be in market to buy a product like milk. So now you're dealing with a 12X or an 11X difference. And so the idea is just to show that actually many people are in market all the time in consumer categories. No surprise for things like milk or food or even clothes. The opposite is true in the B2B world. People are almost never in market. So in some ways, brand building or reaching future buyers who will not buy today with brand building efforts is much more important in the B2B world than it is in the consumer world. But that's not how we think about things today.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? The difference between B2B and B2C is that we think in B2B, we should be doing a lot more performance marketing as opposed to brand. Whereas in B2C, it's a lot more brand than it is performance marketing, or at least, that's kind of what you see. When actually, when you put it under the microscope of the 11X rule, the opposite is true.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I should always caution people about is when I was first talking, so I flew to see the story with Ritson, which is how I think we got put in touch, is Peter and I flew down to Australia and we had a bunch of drinks with Ritson and we were absolutely horribly hungover.
You were at his house in Tassie, right?
Yeah, we were at his house in Tasmania. We saw the world's biggest spider, scared the absolute shit out of us. Didn't know you had spiders as big as station wagons down in Australia, but you do. They're like as big as a shark, basically, a land shark, I guess. Mm-hmm. But, we went out and we had a good night drinking, talking marketing. And then I flew the next day to Adelaide to meet with a bunch of the professors from Ehrenberg-Bass, including John Dawes. And we were just talking about, we're talking about the 60-40 rule and what he thinks about the 60-40 rule. And he was like, it's not really, in my mind, 60-40. It's more like 95-5. I thought that was really fascinating because I had never heard anybody say that. People like.
And Jon, can you clarify the 60-40 rule for, anyone who's listening who might not be familiar with it?
Yeah, that's again, has, I would say, micro fame in the world of marketing effectiveness or advertising effectiveness. The 60-40 rule is from Les Binet and Peter Field, the godfathers of marketing effectiveness. And it says that 60% of your budget should be built on brand building and 40% of your budget should be built on, I guess, like brand activation, right? Or like demand gen. You call it like I guess demand generation would be kind of how I would call it, the 60%, and then demand capture would be the other part of it, right? Or brand and activation is how some people talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's what the 60-40 rule is. And John Dawes just said that, it's not really 60-40, it's more like 95-5. I'm a marketer, so immediately I hear this he's branded this idea 95-5. Well, that's a very simple rule, like 60-40. It's just 95-5. But what do you mean by 95-5? And he says, if you go look at their literature, most people are not in market very often. They're maybe only in market 5 to 10% of the time. And he went through a couple of categories where he had remembered reading about this. One was business banking. One was buying business computers. I think he had 3 examples, and there are 3 examples in the paper he wrote for us at LinkedIn. But the cool thing is we've used AI to now analyze 20 categories. So this is a place where, again, like a single PhD maybe has read enough papers to be able to say there are 3 different categories here. And from that, I can extrapolate and I can it's not really the 95-5 rule isn't really a rule as much as it's a heuristic, right? It is obviously variable by category, but that's the kind of research that if John Dawes wanted to, he could have spent a lot of time, maybe a year, and gone and pulled all the data and done the calculations. That's the kind of thing that AI now does instantaneously. And so we've taken this idea of the 95-5 rule and we've extrapolated it across 20 different B2B categories. And that's actually where, we came up with the 11X rule. It's just kind of a fun way that you can take these ideas and really push them in much kind of broader directions to get much broader insights that are much more applicable to a broad set of B2B buyers. It wouldn't have been possible before AI to do it at the scale. You can now do some of these things.
So I just want to jump back to the story because I think the story continues on from there. So you're horrendously hungover.
Horribly hungover.
At dinner with...
That was just kind of like, I got to meet a bunch of different folks from Ehrenberg-Bass, and I think the final person was John Dawes. And then I ended up having lunch with Jenny Romaniuk and Rachel Kennedy, which was quite lovely in downtown Adelaide. So I had a bunch of different conversations. That was just the one that I remember most obviously saliently because, it's something that I've been very surprised by how popular and in some ways like famous the 95-5 rule has become. Like, I don't even talk about it as much as there's other people on LinkedIn who talk about it all the time. I don't even talk about it much anymore. Like, it makes me feel like we didn't market our idea for long enough. I feel shame about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You didn't keep the branding up.
Right. We disposed of our creative much too early.
If you go back to that lunch or series of lunches and you overheard 95-5 from John Dawes, your ears pricked up, you dug a little bit deeper, he went away, he created a piece on it. Then what happened? How did it go from drinks with Ritson and Tassie to lunch or dinner with John Dawes to then live its own life, even long after you stopped talking about it?
Yeah, I think like lots of ideas, it comes from what's called scenius, right? And the idea is that genius is a single person. Scenius is the scene of people collectively are the genius. And most ideas don't come from a single person. They come from a scene. So in this scene, you can think of, we're working at LinkedIn. We know lots of B2B marketers. So we're kind of well networked in that environment. Some of the practitioners we know are in Australia, so there's a reason for us to go there for business. It happens to be that there are not just practitioners in Australia, there's also some professors. The professors are Ritson, they are John Dawes, they are Jenny Romaniuk, they are Rachel Kennedy, they are Nicole Hartnett, they are Ella Ward, they are Byron Sharp, all these different folks. And so you have this scene of people, obviously, in the marketing effectiveness world broadly. We're kind of spearheading it in the B2B world at LinkedIn. We go down to meet all these professors. And then while we're there, we go have drinks with Ritson and we're just talking a lot about marketing and advertising and how, budgets and all that different stuff. And of course, like these ideas just start kind of rolling around in your head. And then you go talk to Ehrenberg-Bass and they have a very different take on it, but a very relevant take on it, obviously a very quantitative take on it. And then John Dawes, I say, what do you think of the 60-40 rule, which is the and field part of the scene, and he has his own take on it. And then he says, I'm willing to write it up. And we had become a sponsor of Ehrenberg-Bass. And so we were writing a whole series called How B2B Brands Grow. And that becomes one of the, centerpieces of that type of research or that research series. And so, and then we go back to the US and John Dawes is writing the paper in Australia and then he sends it to us and then we market it and Ehrenberg-Bass markets it and Ritson becomes interested in it and other people, who are actual practitioners who run budgets and brands, they become interested in it. And we should talk about why that is, by the way, but it's like anything. I mean, it's not genius, it's scenius. And a lot of different people were involved, I would say. Everyone from Ritson to Romaniuk to Binet and Field to, the B2B Institute to our customers are all had a role in generating that idea.
When you're referring to you and Pete, you're talking about your time at LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, Peter was still in Sydney when after I talked to John Dawes, I immediately called him, again, horribly hungover, and said, you'll never believe what John Dawes told me. And I have a lot of ideas, and Peter has very good taste in ideas. And so he was able to immediately say, that's super interesting. We should have him write it up, and we owe a huge credit to John Dawes here, obviously. John did the writing and the researching. So really, in some sense, it is his idea. But obviously, we were able to plug that idea into the broader B2B marketing effectiveness world that LinkedIn was a central node in, and that's how it started to spread through the network.
The reason I want to highlight that story is not only because, the collective genius of everyone that was involved to get it from seedling out to a big blossoming idea, but if every B2B marketer who's listening to this conversation can understand that something that starts with a seed like that has the potential, with the right people and the right thought processes in mind, it can have the capability of growing into something that has become as big within a community of people. And that in itself is an example of branding. 95.5, 11x.
Yeah, let's pause on this for actually a second more, because this is a very important idea. The minute you name something, the minute you brand something, everyone can talk about it with a common language and share it with a common name. It's more likely to be adopted. It's more likely to be spread. It's more likely to be attributed to you or to your company. So any great idea that people have, they ought to immediately try and brand. I went through a ton of different names for the 11x rule with Claude before I got to the 11x rule. And some were good and some were bad. But the core idea is try to brand anything you think is important to your career or your business or your company or your project, and it's more likely to be successful the minute it gets a brand name. It doesn't mean it's going to be successful. There's a huge power in just naming something.
Tell us a little bit about your process of battling with Claude, of coming up with the 11x rule. Do you have a methodology to go about it, or is it just I'm just gonna throw things at you and upload a bunch of information, see what you give me?
I like mental models a lot. So again, the 95.5 rule is a mental model. Supply and demand is a mental model, right? Mental and physical availability are mental models, right? So I think it's important to have mental models. If you can have smart ideas framed as mental models, they're just shortcuts to make better decisions, right? The more mental models you can use, I think you'll make better decisions on average, and that will have an effect over time, where your successful will compound because you'll be a little bit smarter. And I think for the 11x rule is just trying to come up with what is the framing, what's the naming, what's the branding of this idea. What I was really trying to tease out is I had run this data. So I said, based on the below data, give me a good pithy way to contrast buyer behavior in B2B and B2C categories. That's actually the prompt that I gave to Claude. And what I'm trying to get at there is give me some good names, right? And so it says B2B versus B2C, the attention paradox. In B2B, you're always marketing to everyone who isn't buying. Well, in B2C, you're often selling to everyone who already is. That's a cool idea, by the way. That's basically saying what I said earlier, right? The weird thing is in B2B, you're selling to people who are not buying. You're selling to people who are not buying. Totally contrarian, totally kind of confounding. While in B2B, you're selling to everyone who is buying, right? That alone, it's able to come up with that idea, pithy framing like that, right? Then I'm trying to say, okay, now I understand the framing. Now I want to quantify the effect, right? Or the difference. And so I say, can you incorporate comparison of the averages for B2B and B2C? Make it clear that, it's 20x more common to be in market in B2C. So I'd kind of already done the math in my head. And then it comes up with the attention paradox. It had a bunch of different ways to think about it. 77x more customers, 41x higher in-market presence. So it was going through all the math, trying to frame it. I gave it some other numbers. I don't necessarily know that I ever got to the right idea originally, because I'm asking it at some point, you're calling it an attention paradox now. Is that really the correct way to frame this table? Right. So obviously, I wasn't confident at that point that it had properly understood what I was asking it to do. It had properly branded or understood. And ultimately, I got a bunch of different alternative headlines. It gave me Mind the Gap, B2B versus B2C, the purchasing divide, today versus tomorrow. So I think there's another idea I love called quality, or quantity has a quality all of its own. Quantity has a quality all of its own. And one of the things I love to do is just give data to Claude or GPT and just say, give me 10 variations on this, right? And then I'll choose the one that I like the most. And often I'll say, I like this one, number 7. Give me 10 more variations just on number 7. And so what you're really doing is you're exploring all of the possibilities until you get to the one that you really like. So AI is really good at quantity. Humans, I would say, are better today at quality. And so that's where you get this kind of hybrid intelligence through talking to and working with, something like Claude.
Talking about quantity, I think you talked about how initially they were like looking at 3 categories, and driving that 95-5 rule from it, and then you extrapolated that across 11 categories. How did you break that, and how did that 11 category? First of all, what those 11 categories are, and how did they come about?
A lot of it is just, asking. It's working with AI to figure out which categories kind of are most broadly classified as B2C, which is the milk example, versus B2B, which is going to be ERP. It's going to be CRM. It's going to be cloud. It's going to be cybersecurity. So you're just essentially mapping out the categories. Honestly, a lot of that taxonomy comes from my time at LinkedIn. So I kind of know finance and technology are the 2 big categories there. And within those, we had done a lot of research at the B2B Institute on cloud, on business banking, on cybersecurity, on analytics. So you're just mapping all of those categories. And then you can start to just kind of like, our business is basically market research. So you can say, I want to build all of these different surveys. So people who buy cloud, people who buy ERP, people who buy CRM. And then you can ask them questions like, how often do you buy the category? The LLMs will go out and search the kind of web and figure out, based on a bunch of different data points, like in some sense, millions of data points, what is called the average interpurchase time, AIT. And that is just how often you are buying the category, right? So it's kind of like, again, the milk example is I'm buying it every week. The CRM example is I'm buying it every 3 years. And so what you can say is if it's every 3 years for CRM, then in year 1/3 of the people will be in the category. It's just 1 year divided by 3 years. Gives you 1/3 of the people. 33% of people will be in the category in a given year. But that also means that 66% of people will not be in market in that given year, right? And if it's ERP, which is every 8 years, then in 1 year, 12% of people will be in the category, 1 divided by 8. But another 88% will not be in market, 7 divided by 8. So that's what our product does. Is it structures all this data that is found in large language models to do very specific market research. And one of the things you can do is figure out how often people buy the category. Once you have that knowledge around how often people buy the category, you can start to do the calculations. And so again, the 95-5 rule isn't really the 95-5 rule. It is much more, it's like the 66-33 rule for CRM, and it's more like the 88-12 rule for ERP, right? But you have to actually know, you have to have read the John Dawes paper. And in John Dawes' paper, he describes how you do the calculation for average interpurchase time. And so you have to know that paper exists. You have to read the paper. You have to understand this AIT concept is important. And then you have to actually go work with an LLM, either through our system, or you could probably do it broadly if you wanted to try to do this kind of research, right? So it's AI will help you to answer questions, but the questions become more important as a result because, if you ask a bad question, you'll get a bad answer. If you ask a rigorous question, a well-structured question like John Dawes did, then LLMs help you to kind of like put that on steroids to really accelerate that, to really scale that in a way that is magical.
So once I know that information, what is your recommendation in terms of modifying the marketing that the organization is going to be doing compared to the classic model that is rolled out now?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I said to John Dawes, and I think this is very important from a budgeting perspective, I said, oh, it's a 95-5 rule. That means I should spend 95% of my money on brand marketing, right? Or demand creation. And I should spend 5% on demand capture, or kind of like, activation or lead generation. He said, no, that's not what you should do. He said, you should still probably spend 50% of your money on kind of brand, so demand creation, and 50% on lead generation or demand capture, because you have to fight intensely, kind of almost like ferociously, to win customers in this quarter. So your business continues to acquire customers, to make money, to kind of grow, so you can reinvest and then kind of win more share and then win more customers and then reinvest to win more share and more customers. And so you kind of always have to be acquiring customers. So you really can't spend too much money purely on kind of brand or demand creation. You have to probably balance it more than the rules suggest. So from a practical perspective, it isn't what I originally thought, right? It's not that you can just spend all of your money on brand. That's not what it says. So that's, I think, one thing from a brand or from a budgeting perspective that's quite important for people to understand. I mean, there are other implications too. I mean, the other implication is, let's take it on the creative side, right? So forget budget for a second. Let's talk about creative. On the creative side, what it really means is the more outmarket your category, like ERP is much more outmarket. There's many fewer people buying, right? If you go back to the math, it's every 8 years for ERP. That means that 88% of people are not in market this year. They're out market, and 12% are in market. Compare that to CRM, where it's more like 1/3 of people, 33% are in market and 66% are out market. It's basically saying that in a really outmarket category like ERP, you want to spend more money, I think, on brand. Category that's more in market like CRM, you want to spend less money on brand, right? So like that's how you'd make kind of like an adjustment for the specific category dynamics. And realistically, what that means is everybody does lead generation in B2B or account-based marketing in B2B. So I don't think anybody really needs any advice on how to do that. I think what they need advice is how to run better brand campaigns that build better mental availability for specific customer needs. And so what you really do need is you need a series of ads that speak to the, like, it needs to save me money. It needs to help me collaborate with my colleagues. It needs to help me, like, deliver faster, right? There's all these customer needs category entry points. Your brand campaign should be anchored in those needs, and they shouldn't be trying to sell anything because people are not buying. They should be trying just to be remembered. And so that can be partly a category entry point strategy where you're talking about those needs, but you probably need to do it in a creative way, a humorous way, a memorable way. Like, I'm not a creative, so I don't try to tell people how to develop creative, but it's not buy now. It's kind of like, remember me because I'm the Gecko Geico, or remember me because I'm Float from Progressive, or remember me because I'm, Marmite. It's not that kind of thing that you would do to kind of get somebody to commit to buy today. It's a totally different thing. It's just, this is fun and interesting and memorable. And next time you do enter the market, which is in a year or two, you'll think of me.
It's Vegemite over here, by the way, John, just FYI. 95-5 rule, that's assuming that 100 people in a room match your ICP and 95 of them are not yet ready to buy. 5% are ready to buy. So just to make that clear, it's 100 people of your ICP, not 100 people, doesn't matter who they are. It's 100 people of your ICP.
Yeah, you would, but there's even an important concept within this. So yes, you want on-target reach. And on-target reach just means relevant people who may buy from you. But there can be an argument, like one of the pieces of data that we had at LinkedIn was people change 10% of the category, like 10% of people in cloud change jobs every year, which means in 10 years, everybody changes in that category, right? Like it's a whole new set of buyers. 100% of the buyers are new within a 10-year period, right? Because it's 10% a year times 10 years, 100% of the category turns over. So you can make a case for broader reach advertising than just your ICP or just the on-target reach, because, I may be working in consumer at, P&G, and then LinkedIn hires me and now I'm in B2B. And so if you had reached beyond just B2B customers into some consumer stuff like P&G or Diageo, then I know about you. And then when I move to the B2B company, I'm more likely to buy from you. So I wouldn't say you want to go too far beyond your kind of target audience, but I think people worry too much about waste and not nearly enough about effectiveness, right? Or we often talk like too much about efficiency, which is the waste argument, and not enough about effectiveness, which is kind of like the reaching enough people to make your numbers argument.
Sure. But effectively, you're still talking to a person that will eventually end up in a relevant role to what it is that you're talking about. You are effectively trying to reach the majority of that 100 people need to be matching your ICP, need to have some kind of interest or it to be relevant to them in order to buy the thing that you're selling, right?
Yeah. And you would be amazed how little reach companies get against those 100 people. Like, we looked a lot at this data because, Peter and I were extremely interested in brand advertising and in demand creation, And so one of the things you would want to do in an ideal world, if you're an Ehrenberg-Bass practitioner, like if you worked at P&G or Unilever or Diageo, you would want to reach all 100 people, right? And you'd want to reach them evenly throughout the year. And so you'd kind of want your new unique reach over the course of the year to be 100% of the category. In B2B, people rarely ever reach even 20% of the category in a year. So there really is no reach strategy in B2B. It's all lead gen, BM, super targeted. And so often these companies do not even reach, more than 5 or 10% of the category in a given year because they don't understand that there's a value in reaching people who are not going to buy it today, but will buy it in the future. So it is important to say when we talk about the 100 people, there's so much opportunity for brands that want to reach, they're willing to reach more than the 5 or 10% of the category that is being reached today. Like if you're willing to reach or willing to invest to reach 25 or 50% of the category over the course of the year, you will be known by many more customers than your competitors. And over time, that will have a real, I think, compounding effect in on your business and your brand.
Your solution to that is, still keep doing what it is that you're doing, B2B marketers and B2B companies, with your lead gen and your ABM and whatnot, right? But the answer to being able to not just reach people who are not yet ready to buy, which we understand to be the majority in this case, but don't be so specific in terms of just trying to brand market to your ICP today. Try and reach slightly wider market than that. Don't confine yourself. And so that's your answer to that, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a very specific way we talked about a reach-based strategy at LinkedIn, which again, you can use this on LinkedIn, you can use this other places as well, but you generally want to get reach in 3 ways. You want what's called effectiveness, efficiency, and then evenness, and they're all related. So effectiveness is just saying, go on LinkedIn and figure out how many people are in your category. How many people could be buyers of cybersecurity? Let's say that it's 100 people, right? Number of addressable people in the market, right? And then you want to actually track how many of those people have I reached over the course of the year. And that's just a number that you can track, right? Unique reach over time. And you want that ideally to be 100%, as I said. You also want to reach them efficiently. So you want to limit frequency and increase reach. You can do that practically by using the reach objective on LinkedIn, which will, for 1 week period, it will prioritize reach and it will say no more than 1 frequency, right? Which is just a pure reach strategy, no frequency. At the end of a week, it will reset. So you're always going to get some frequency, but it practically means you're going to get more reach than frequency. And then you can divide the budget you're spending by the number of people you are uniquely reaching throughout the year. And that will give you a cost per reach. That's your efficiency metric. So your effectiveness metric is how many people have the 100 have I reached so far? Your efficiency metric is what's my cost per reach so far throughout the year? And then if you run things evenly, so if you spend it all in 1 week, you're going to get a ton of frequency, not a lot of reach. If you spread your money out literally 1/12, so every month, 1/12, that's your budget, and you just spend it equally over the course of the year, you will by definition reduce too much frequency or reduce frequency, increase reach. And then that's the kind of way to make sure that by running it evenly, you reach a lot of people, you reduce frequency. And so you reach a lot of people and you do it at a low cost per reach. So it's effectiveness, efficiency, and evenness. Those are kind of the 3 E's of a reach-based strategy. So that's what you should try to do to reach more people who are out of market, who are not going to buy from you. You will also reach some people, by the way, of course, who are in market and will buy from you, right? But that's a way to bring reach into it as a way to complement what people do today, which is more lead generation, account-based marketing, kind of, demand gen type activity.
You've just provided every listener with a really nice, dare say it, hack as to just getting going with the thing that they're not doing enough of.
Yeah, I mean, nobody does. I believe the numbers, just to give you more evidence on how effective this can be as a strategy, is like when we looked at this at LinkedIn, and I would be shocked if it's changed at all, something like 83, 85, 87% of the money on LinkedIn is spent on lead generation objectives. And then the remaining, whatever, 15% is spent on brand building, objectives. So that just means nobody's running on a reach basis. And people don't even know how to run on a reach basis anymore. Like it's something that everybody would have known 30 years ago, before digital. And then after digital, people forget how to run on a reach basis. But you got to remember, it's like I've heard it called the refrigerator test. If you go open your refrigerator, every product in that refrigerator was built in a time before digital marketing, right? And it was all based on some sort of reach-based strategy where you couldn't measure a click. You were primarily measuring the reach you could get, right? But digital's totally inverted everything. And now people have no idea how to run on a reach basis. But as I said, because nobody does it, there's a huge opportunity, right, to actually go and do that. It's like, it's contrarian and it's right, as we talk a lot about, right? And so it means you're going to have an advantage in the market. If you're willing to spend even 20, 30% of your budget in this way, your competitors are probably spending maximum 15% in this way. So you'll double their budget on reach. You'll reach a lot more people. You'll acquire a lot more customers. And over time, you'll grow and win market share.
And Jon, on that note, what would you say are some of the, outside of LinkedIn, what are some of the potential untapped or underused channels that you think a lot more B2B marketers should leverage?
I mean, the one I think is really interesting and compelling is YouTube. A lot of what I'm talking about, I mean, there's a very important caveat. What I'm talking about is I'm talking a lot about reach, which is the media part of the equation. I've not talked about creative. Bad creative with a lot of reach will not perform, right? And we can talk about how to measure creative. It's attention, branding, linkage, and equity. There's a whole formula for that as well. But assuming you have good creative, and it seems like it increasingly needs to be video creative for what it's worth. I'm not totally convinced of that, but almost all of these platforms seem to be prioritizing the reach of video over other formats. So if I had a video strategy, like we are pursuing now at Evidenza, a video strategy, then you can do it on LinkedIn for sure, but really where we're also going to prioritize it is going to be YouTube. It's an incredible format for you. I mean, I show up to YouTube, I have to watch ads. It's a compulsory view. Like a LinkedIn feed, you can scroll past it. On YouTube, you cannot scroll past it, right? So if you have a high attention environment where you have to watch the ad, I mean, that's an and in its video, that's an incredible platform for brand building, brand investing. So, we're prioritizing as a business LinkedIn, and then we prioritize YouTube because those are the two places where you have the right kind of environment, you have the right audience, you have the right targeting, you have a video format. So I think YouTube is a really valuable place to invest. And then another place I think is very interesting is everyone tells me this, and I've seen it for our own business. We have our own podcast, actually, and it's been very effective for our business. It just seems like there's an enormous opportunity within podcast advertising as well. Again, I don't think people realize how kind of intimate the experience is. Somebody's just listening with their kind of AirPods, and they can hear your voice and hear your brand. And so there's like stuff you have to do with it. It's obviously got to be very intelligent around sonic advertising versus visual advertising. But what we're going to invest in is going to be LinkedIn, it's going to be YouTube, and it's going to be podcasts, right? So those will be the three places where I feel there's still these kind of arbitrage opportunities.
How far down the journey are you with Evidenza's video strategy?
We did 13 podcasts this year. They're all about 30 minutes long. So it's 400 minutes of.
So that's not advertising, right? That's your own podcast.
Our own podcast. But then what we do is like what we realized probably a third of the way through those episodes, those 12 episodes, is that it doesn't really matter if people listen to the entire podcast or not. What you're really trying to do is get a couple of clips out of it. Like we live in a clip culture. So you realize that you do the entire podcast of 30 minutes so you can get a couple of good clips. Like if we can get 3 good clips out of this, and then you can either promote those organically or advertise those with paid, then that's actually an enormous benefit to your business. Like if I can say one smart thing here, and then I can advertise it to reach all people who might buy our product or service, want market research and B2B for impossible audiences. Well, that's an incredible way to build brand. And in some cases, acquire customers. So, I mean, that is kind of our strategy. We have a very structured format. We have 4 sections that we always repeat on every podcast, but really we're basically like hunting for clips, right? It's like, we either know what the clips are going to be going into, or somebody says something. We have a producer who's like, pause, say that again, and we'll even shoot something 3 or 4 times to get the right clip. And then what you're doing is you're then taking the clip and you're saying, like, watch the entire episode, but, we promote the episode with the 2 or 3 best clips. And often that's what people see, right? They just see, hey, I saw the thing you said about segmentation, or I thought something you said about kind of, the fact that B2B marketers don't do research, and then we also dress up. We dress up in these.
Yes, I've seen them.
Which we can talk about as well, which I also think there's a very important strategy there, which is most of these environments, like outside of YouTube, they're scrollable environments where people can skip. They don't have to stop and watch. And I've had many people say to me, and I take this as a compliment, not as an insult, like, I just scrolled through, I didn't listen to what you guys said, but they knew it was us because they saw us in our costumes, right? Our Ren Fair costumes. And so you have to understand that you're advertising now in a skippable world. And in a skippable world, if you don't heavily brand, like over brand your stuff, you get skipped and you get ignored. In our case, we get skipped, but we get remembered. And so that's also a huge advantage to us. Companies that don't have that are at a disadvantage. Companies that have that are at an advantage, but companies often don't want to over brand things. Companies think that if they brand things, people will skip their ads. People are going to skip your ads no matter what. So you better brand things. That's probably the only chance you have is to brand things. So it's, again, just people have it backwards. Like, oh my God, I can't brand this. People won't want to watch it. People don't want to watch it. People don't really like watching advertising. So it's another way where we've designed the very specific video format with branding that is unskippable. You may skip us. You can't skip the branding.
Those snackable videos, they're great. All the branding that you can get in there, even better. And you do this really well, you and Peter, is that those video pieces are coming from your personal profiles.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Another just underrated, I would say, tactic is just running the ads as thought leadership ads, not as brand ads, right? Because people are more likely to watch ads from people because they don't realize it's an ad from a person. They think it's from a person. So that's just another tactical, I would say, tweak one can make to reach people in a way that feels more natural, more native, and then you're likely to get better, either reach or view throughs or clicks or whatever you want to kind of measure by.
Well, you'll simply just get more engagement, more comments, more people probably taking the absolute piss out of your costumes, and feeling more comfortable to do so if you're sharing it from your personal profile as opposed to the Evidenza company page.
I think you have to basically be, I hate to say this because it obviously has implications for the political world, but in general, I think you have to be polarizing in some way or another. Like lots of people do not like our costumes. So you could almost frame it as, 50% of the people love the costumes, 50% of the people hate the costumes, but 100% of the people have an opinion about the costumes, right? And that's
What
kind
are
of,
some of the best comments you got on that one, John?
well, I mean, people, this goes back a long time. Like when we used to go talk to customers at LinkedIn, we'd be like, hey, like the best performing advertising is the Geico Gecko, or it is like, what's the one in London is the meerkat, like there's these famous
Compare
there's
the market.
character
Yeah.
led advertising, right? And companies would always say to us, we can't do that, we're too serious. And the reality is the only thing that is serious, or they're not serious, right? I love you, but you're not serious people, as we learned in the TV show Succession, right? The most serious thing is being remembered. Like that's what really matters. That's the serious thing. So if you're not being remembered, then you're not serious, in your marketing. And so I feel companies didn't understand that, and they thought that you can't use characters because characters are not serious. But again, like characters are the best way to be remembered. So if you're really following the data, if you're really being empirical, you would use a character strategy, but companies won't do that. So we always got this criticism of like, we can't do this, or this pushback, we can't do this. And the beautiful thing about being at your own business is you can do whatever you want, you know? And we do the most empirical thing, which is we do what the data tells us to do, which is use characters. We happen to be the characters, but it's a place where having your own business, you can really be data driven. In companies, it is hard to be data driven because your boss may not want you to, they may think it's serious to be serious. And in fact, I think it's often serious to be unserious. The criticisms we get are really around AI. They're not around our marketing, I wouldn't say. I mean, I would say it would be hard to contradict what we do from a purely marketing perspective because it's mostly just following the data.
As in AI from Evidenza's perspective, that, oh, like this data is not as good as,
Yeah.
is that what you mean?
Yeah. People are AI skeptics.
Yeah.
A lot of people, for many very good and very bad reasons, don't want AI to be a thing. Don't think AI is a thing. Think it's overhyped, think it's overstated, think it's fake. And often it's because they make their money from the kind of traditional world. And that's why they don't
A
want
lot of market research firms making comments by the sound of it.
Yeah, for sure. We get that all the time, but it's kind of like, I think it's funny because there's an idea called the Streisand effect, which is where by criticizing something, you end up raising awareness for us. So, or end up raising awareness for it. In this case, it's us, where a lot of people do criticize us. And in fact, all it does is build more awareness for us, So I would say the smartest thing people can do is not to comment, but people can't help themselves. They have to comment, But as I said, 50% of the people love us, 50% of the people hate us, 100% of the people are talking about us, and that's the ultimate objective.
One question that I think both Vinny and I wanted to ask was around, you talk about kind of the skeptics around AI and so on. What is your advice for marketers to prepare themselves for the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, I would say like there's a piece of advice that I really like, which is that the best ideas are either found in like old papers or new technology. And what I mean by that is go read the classics, like go read How Brands Grow, go read The Long and the Short of It, go read all the stuff from John Philip Jones, go read the stuff from like George Gallup going way back, like go read the stuff from Ogilvy. Like there's lots of brilliant stuff. Paul Feldwick has written a bunch of amazing stuff. Like go read the greats of advertising, marketing, communications. Even if you don't agree with them, go read them. There was lots of great ideas in these kind of old books. And then I would say on the other hand, like there's lots of great ideas coming out of new technology or new academic papers. And that's really the world of AI. And so I would read the classics and then I would tinker with AI to figure out how to kind of execute on classic ideas that have stood the test of time. Like I think that to me is that's what we do at Evidenza, right? Like we take great ideas and then we build a system that takes great ideas, timeless ideas, and then executes on those ideas for marketers, whether it be segmentation, targeting, positioning, could be creative testing, could be media plans, could just be pure market research around, which messaging pillar is the most resonant or which, message is most clear, which message is most confusing, how long is the buying process, how many other people are in the buying. There's all sorts of reasons or kind of things that people want to know. But figure out the right ideas, whether it be market research or marketing strategy, and then use AI to go and execute on that. Like that would be the way to do it. That's the advice I would give to people. I will also say the one thing I always like to say is it's going to, I mean, I'm talking my own book, but I genuinely believe what I'm about to say. AI is not overrated. AI is probably underrated. Like the impact it's going to have in places like healthcare is going to be enormous. It's going to extend lives, save lives. It's going to drive cars. It's going to produce, I think, like more green energy than we can possibly imagine. And of course, if it's going to like save lives and, create green energy and drive us around, like obviously it's going to do incredible things in marketing. So I would just say anybody who underestimates AI does so at his or her own peril.
Jon, just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me. Great time.